Hey, so today we are dealing with the Polyend Tracker Plus, but mainly what's on the inside of these things and in its friends with the Play Plus and the Tracker Mini, because today we're looking at the synth engines and more specifically we're looking at the Wavetable FM. I'm really enjoying that one because it's a 2-pole FM synth, but it's using wavetables to create the oscillators, and there's a bunch of variables in there that make it a really cool sound design system, as well as you get some really nice gritty textures to more like smooth and ethereal sound. So I thought we'll go through each of the variables together just so you have an idea of how this one works and where I find it's being really suitable. So let's get straight into it. Alright, we're here with the Polyend Tracker Plus, and today we are talking synth engines and more specifically the Wavetable FM. So if you got the Play Plus or the Tracker Mini, you'll be able to get access to it, and probably out of the lot this is my favorite synth because I do have a soft spot for those sort of old school Yamaha like little PS keyboards that you could get back in the day, and like that's something that I learned how to make music on, and really like old games and that use those sort of FM sounds as well. So I've really enjoyed this instrument and just sort of the sonic capability that you can get out of it. So instead of talking about it, let's have a bit of a listen of what we've got something access to. So I'm just going to just make sure we're still running with that palette, and then we can load up a bunch of different sounds. So as you can hear, we've got a lot of sonic texture, and I think FM is one of those synths that really has a distinct character, but you can make a wild bunch of sounds with it. So let's have a look at a bit under the hood and how this thing is working. And I'm just going to initialize the patch. So you got that basic FM sound. And I chose the tracker for this one, or the Tracker Plus, just because of how everything is laid out. I've got this nice grid here to navigate around, so it sort of separates all those different sections into clear and defined areas. We are able to navigate through here, so just going up and down. I can use the scroll wheel to choose the variable that I'm working on, and then as you saw I could sample down here. So it just gives us a palette that you can understand, but with your Polyend Play you just got this list as one big long part, and then you have the knobs to be able to control the sounds in each one. So I'm hoping this video goes through and just shows how this engine works here, because it is kind of complex, and really I think to start with you just got to remember with FM there's always a carrier and then there's always a modulator. So the modulator doesn't make sound, it just augments the carrier, which is the one that makes sense. So think of 1 and 2, and then we'll be on a good roll, because this is a 2-pole synth. So there's 2 oscillators, but with wavetables they do some really cool things. So I've started with the oscillators because there is a lot of stuff here, but really just understand that we're dealing with ratios. So we've got these 2 ratios here. So if I play that one, it sounds like it's going up in pitch, but this is where we have ratios. So like I said, oscillator 1 is the modulator, but if I start applying FM now, and it gets into crazy town. So really what we're trying to do is find really unique ratios that make a really cool sound. So sometimes I like adding a little bit less. Gets into that more darker territory, and sort of having nice ratios like 3 and 5 is something I really enjoy sometimes. So if I come back up here, so it's just creating like harmony. Now I think this is the most character building of this synthesizer, because with a traditional FM synth they're all basically sine waves that we're applying to each other, but this one we are using wavetables, and we have a variety of different shapes that we can pick from. But if I scroll through, you can hear that it's bending the sound, so it's giving us a whole variety of different types of sounds, and it's not just one axis, like we've got a variety of them here. So if I was to just leave it midway, and each one of those has their own unique character, so you've got a lot of sonic capability just in this little part up here to create your sound. So I'm just going to leave it on smoother and just keep with that part, because now we're getting into more of that feedback session. Because it goes from the modulator to the carrier, we can sort of feedback on each one and then sort of bend it in between. So it creates a lot of distinct characters. So if I start with just the carrier wave and start feedbacking it, as you can see, it starts going into that noise territory, which is a very handy thing to understand. So you can make some like hi-hats using FM and that, which we'll touch on a little bit with the Perk drum machine that we have access to, but we'll say that for another video. But just think of like, this is how we sort of like create some extra dynamic on top of this. So if I bring back in some of the FM, and then we could say, it's like finding diamonds in the rough. That sounds pretty cool. And then really we can actually have it go full circle. So we're sort of using the feedback of the carrier to modulate the modulator. So it just creates this like sort of really gnarly feedback, which gets right into noise territory. But there's a few other features that help us make our sound. Like we have our fine tune, so we can control like how the sound is sort of shifting. So if we're like almost on point with these ratios, but you just want to bump it a bit more, you can do it here. And you also got some resets, because with FM, like those oscillators are just going to keep going on in the background. So every time I hit the note, I can tell it to say, no, you start from here and then go forward. So if you're trying to create a very interesting sound, so something like this might be useful if I put them on. So it tries and keeps some of that texture before like applying the FM and that. And then oversampling, which... So that's the oscillator section, but I think what brings FM, and usually a lot more modern FMs have this, is some sort of subtractive filter. So if you make like a really bright, buzzy sound, something like this, we can actually sculpt it back using a filter. So if we jump into here, we've got one, we can sort of just hear what's going on. We've also got some resonance as well. We have a variety of different filters that we have, a whole bunch of them. So we've got like some low pass filters based on like the fat synth. We've got some high pass filters as well. We've also got some band pass as well. And I think we have some notch filters at the end. So just a whole bunch of different sounds that we can play with, and they're going to bring a lot of character to your synth. So when you start playing with this, you also get access to some invisible hands. Like we have the event envelope amount, which is applying to this one here, which we can use to control our sound. So makes it brighter, but it's following an envelope. We'll just touch on that in a second. But the other one is the note track. So if you ever dealt with filters, you want the sort of higher notes to have less of the filter up top, because they're the high notes. We don't want to lose the high end. Same thing down here. We've got the low note. So it's just opening up the filter as we play through the notes. And that's really the filter section. So we'll move on. This is the amp envelope. So this one is how we control the volume of our instrument. So if we're making like little short tappy sounds or making long pad sounds, we're using an ADSR. And if you're not familiar with the term, you have like your attack. So that's how it's going to come in. So straight up, it's going to go bam, straight up to the top. Although you can have like an angle to slope it in. The decay is how it's coming down from 100%, which falls into the sustain. So right now it's just an AD envelope because there's no sustain. So it doesn't matter if I hold the note, it's not going to keep on. But if I bump that up a little bit, you can hear how that note's coming in. And then the last part is the release. So this is when you let go. That is going to kick in. So if I make that really long and just tap it, you can hear it like fade out in the background. Now they just didn't give us one envelope, we actually got two, which is very handy to apply to different areas, which we'll have a look in the mod matrix, as well as some LFOs. Now LFOs is like a squiggly line that just keeps going on, but we have a few ways that we can control it. So we can turn it on to sync, so every time you hit that note, it's going to start. The ratio is like how much that waveform, so a lot lower number like that is like how long the cycle is. If you have like a really high number, it's going to be like really fast, so you can control it like that. And it's not just a squiggly line, we've got some other shapes that we can play with. So you got like a triangle, the sine, which is a squiggly line, you have ramp up and ramp down. They're going to control the like how it fades in and out. Square, which is like on and off, and sample and hold, which is like just random points that I'll pick across. and we have 2 of those as well. And the reason why we have so much modulation is to come into the mod matrix, which looks kind of scary. There is a lot of stuff going on in here, but if you break down each section into its own individual parts, like there is a bunch here, but you have a source, you have a destination, and you have a mount. So as you can see, we have all those sources here. So from the amp envelope to the LFO2, that's something that we can select for. And then we can tell where we want to send it. So that's why I spent a lot of time just talking about these 3 parts here, because that's our sound making part. But these are the ways that we can like manipulate invisible hands all through this machine. And then you have the amount, which is how much you want to apply it. So this one's in bipolar, so you have like a north and a south. So you want to add some or take some away. And then that's how we route the sounds around this machine. And just with all those, you can get very complex with FM. Like this is only 2 poles, and there is so much that you can do with this machine. So from like really synthetic hi-hats to like really fat bass lines to some really gnarly sounds, like that initial demo of the sounds, like there is a lot of stuff that you can do here. In the last part, which has some nice functions in here too, is like a glide. So if you want notes to like bend, so it's not like it starts here and then it instantly jumps to the next note, you can create some bends in between. We got some options to help us control how that bend happens and then how much time it takes for that bend to happen. And the last part is a volume, so this is how much that sound's going to sit, so we can control it inside the synth. And that's pretty much the synth engine itself. So what I wanted to touch on now is how, as a tracker, we can actually control the sound, because right now we only have 3 synth engines to work with, which sounds quite limiting, but we do have access to our macros, and this really does open up this sound engine because we have a few of them. And if we route them correctly through the FM synth, we can get like a really broad spectrum of sounds that we can get out of one machine. And they live up here in this second menu here. So as you can see, we've got our name, we have a bipolar, we have a unipolar. So these are different ways that we can manipulate that sound inside the engine. So how does it work? Like the first one, we can edit it so we can keep all our namings really good. And you want to make sure you do that so you know what you're doing in that second panel. We tell it if it's bipolar or unipolar. So bipolar is when it starts in the center and goes up and down. Unipolar, when you put it off, will go from top to bottom to top. And then you have access to some parameters. So same thing like the mod matrix. We're just applying this number to a particular point, and then we tell it an amount. So that's how you control that. And we got a variety of them as well. So if I needed a new spot, so if like say I'm controlling multiple things at once, you can just bump it in and it'll create a new one. So this is how you add a lot more, and you get up to 5 for each one, and there's 6 of them to work with. So 30 control points. You've got a few spots that you can put this stuff. So coming back full circle, coming back to this front panel, I really do enjoy giving this one a lot more polyphony. So I'm treating it more like a polysynth, like the DX7 and all those sort of FM machines. It does eat up those channels quite well. And like if you're giving it enough room for, like say I'm using 4 channels and 4 points of polyphony, if I'm doing some tricky things with chance command, so I'm not going to hit all the notes at once. Maybe it does, it's going to create a jar, so you can control it and give it more or less depending on what you're trying to do. The next part, we have the gain, so this sort of gives us a control over the entire synth to, like, if it's too abrupt, we can bring it back. If it's not, we can push it in. We have panning, so if we want to move it left or right. And then we have some really nice effects with reverb and delay, which FM really loves. So I hope that's given you a bit of food for thought, because I think this one is really special because of that wavetable aspect. It gives a variety of different sounds. It's kind of like the Digitone that's in the back there, but it's a 2-pole system, so it's like one of those really old keyboards. And like for me, I do a lot of old school game music, so having access to that sort of sound on a device like that is really handy. And like I'm finding it where I'm using it more for like keys and like melody elements and like bringing that FM together. And when I create my sort of macros, it's creating ways I can shift the sound around, so I can get some more variance out of having just one system running the FM. So I hope you enjoyed that one. If you did, definitely give it a thumbs up. I'm building this series around these synth engines, so everyone's got a bit of an idea of how they work and how to get the sounds that they want out of them. So hopefully it finds them, as well as if you got any comments or queries, please feel free to leave them down below. I do go down there and try and flesh out this type of content and just give a little bit more to the video so people can get a bit extra. And yes, this is part of a series I'm going through each one, so if you're looking for those, I look forward to seeing you next time.